So, Shaun, let's get into part 2 of this. Let's just kind of dive real quick into the team aspect of it. Let's talk about the Notre Dame floor versus ceiling as a team. I'll let you start. When you look at this Notre Dame team, give me your floor, what it looks like, and then we'll put a record on it at the end.
The floor looks like, for me, what we saw from 2017 to 2021, which was, people say, that's 5 straight seasons of double-digit wins, right? Couple of, trips into the playoff, 14 playoff, but no real championship contender, right? It was just kind of like, no, I don't want to use the word flatline. The program had leveled off. And there really was no clear path to really being a true contender. And so this is what we get to see. We have seen in the first 3 seasons of Notre Dame, 9-4, 10-3, and then 14-2 with a trip to the national championship game under Marcus Freeman. So we have seen improvement each year, but now we get to see if Notre Dame can stack national contending seasons back to back. Can they be true national title contenders in back-to-back seasons under Marcus Freeman? Because I don't think we've seen that since Lou Holtz, in my opinion. Like, we've seen double-digit wins. We've seen a really good team. We've seen a top 10 program. But has Notre Dame legitimately had 2 teams in back-to-back seasons where you felt like they are true national title contenders? Notre Dame they definitely have an opportunity to do it. But for me, that is the floor of just simply, we're title contenders. We've shown it back-to-back seasons that we're title contenders. If the regular season record, I think this goes to your point. That's going to be determined by the postseason, right? Not the regular season. That's going to be determined by the postseason, because that's when they prove whether or not they're true title contenders, because of the way the playoff expanded is now set up. For me, I'll just go ahead and throw it out there. The ceiling is winning. That's it. That's the ceiling. Winning it all. I don't care the composition. I don't care if it's an undefeated regular season. I don't care if it's a 1-loss regular season. The end all be all, and the ceiling is winning a national championship. That's it.
Ask an Ohio State fan, would you rather have been 15-1 and lose the title game, or 14-2 and win the title? I would think everyone with a brain would say, I'd rather go 14-2 and win the title. Because at the end of the day, that's ultimately what matters. I've said this before, Nick Saban had 7 national title teams. Only 2 of them went undefeated. Yeah, it's hard to do. As long as you're undefeated in the last 3 or 4, that's all that matters.
Yeah, the floor for me is like we're just being Notre Dame, right? You went 14-2. You made the playoffs. You had a great regular season. But if Notre Dame does that and they lose in the quarterfinal, that would be a floor to me. That would be a floor. Like, I'm not even thinking about missing the playoffs, all that stuff. All that, to me, no, that's not even a floor. That points back to the culture I think Marcus Freeman has created. Like, all right, now this is where we're at. And the norm should become, like it does in most programs when they get into their run or that window, we expect to win.
Right.
I think we have a program now where these players and these coaches, they expect to win the national championship. You said they felt that way going into the season, even if we didn't feel like it and fans didn't feel like it, they felt like it going into last season. I truly believe they feel like it this year. It's like I said, when was the last time that belief existed in the program? Yeah. With the coaches and players that they legitimately.
Well, the previous coach would always make excuses. I mean, I would hear excuses before the season every year from certain circles of why they weren't going to be able to win. And it was just because they were always lowering the standard. You made a great comment, Shaun, that I want to kind of hit on for a second. You talked about the expectation, and that is such an important piece of this, because part of what worked for last year was the expectation was what it was. And when they lost to Northern Illinois, there was no reshifting there was no moving in the goalposts for Marcus Freeman and his staff and his leaders. There was none. Matter of fact, it was doubling down on it. And so it's creating an element to where there was a belief that if we listen to coach, and coach means Marcus Freeman, Mike Denbrock, Al Golden, Al Washington, Mike Mickens, Mike Brown, Dylan McCullough, Joe Rummy, listen to coach, right? Big picture and at your position, then and do what they're telling us to do, then we can be that team. And there was supreme confidence in that. And it was them not playing to their level of football that got them beat. And that's why a team that I would say is maybe not as talented as some other teams that Notre Dame has had in the past, more depth, but not. I mean, there was no Jalen Smith. I love Xavier Watts, love Benjamin Morrison, There was no Xavier Watts on last year's team. I mean, excuse me, there was a Xavier Watts. There was no Jalen Smith on last year's team. There was no Manti Te'o on last year's team. It was just depth top to bottom. You know what I mean? Like, you look at the offensive line, there was no Zach Martin on last year's team. There was no Ronnie Stanley on last year's team. There was no Quentin Nelson on last year's team. There was no Will Fuller or Michael Floyd on last year's team. There was no Tyler Eifert on last year's team. But there was a belief that in an expectation. And remember, we talked about this before the season when some people were getting mad at Marcus Freeman because he wouldn't he said it's not about winning and losing. Remember that show we did, Shaun? Because people were getting mad like, no, it's just Notre Dame. It's like, you guys are completely missing the point of what he's saying. He's saying our standard is beyond winning and losing. Our standard is we play here. Because if we play here, the winning and losing takes care of itself. When they played here or anywhere close to here, they not only beat people last year, they crushed people. When they didn't play here, they got beat. And that's why Marcus Freeman has been so pissed off this offseason. Is because it's not that they lost Ohio State. They know Ohio State was a great football team. It was, we didn't play Notre Dame football. We didn't play our game. And so now we don't know if our game is good enough because we didn't play it. And that's the frustration. But that's the difference in standard of saying, well, our goal is to go at least 10-2. No, our goal is to play at Notre Dame caliber football, to play to our best potential, because we know if we do that, it doesn't really matter who's on the other sideline. And it's a little stuff. Who you guys playing this week? It doesn't matter who we play this week. You know what I mean? Like, that's who Notre Dame's got to be, but not in the disrespectful way that Howard Cross talked about Northern Illinois, but more so like, dude, I don't care that we're playing Penn State this week. We play Notre Dame football, and it'll take care of itself. You can still respect your opponent, but it's about you. And that's the thing that Marcus Freeman was talking about last year that people missed when he said it's not about winning and losing. He wasn't giving us this as long as we try hard thing. That's not what he was saying. He was saying, no. That's not a high enough standard. Because how many times, and this is what people didn't understand about, like, this seemed like a Brian Kelly and a Nick Saban. Nick Saban would be in the press conference after a 30-point win, raging about how his team played. Raging. Like, did they lose? Because this guy's acting like they lost. Because he's like, dude, we beat them by 30 just because we're way better than them. But we didn't play the way, because he knew you play like that at Ole Miss next week, or whoever the team was. We play like this against Johnny Manziel next week, or we play like this against Clemson, or we play like this against Georgia. We're going to get beat. That was the standard. Whereas Brian Kelly would get mad if you didn't love on him for beating Wake Forest by a touchdown. That's when he went off on me in 2011, because I wasn't happy about the fact they beat Wake Forest by a touchdown. We won the game. That was his, we won. No. That's not the standard. The standard is playing here and playing this brand of Notre Dame football, and then saying, knowing that if we do that, it doesn't matter who's on the other sideline because they can't beat us. That's the difference.
And that's what he said about the national championship game. We didn't play the way we play. That wasn't Notre Dame. That wasn't our team. Like, forget the injuries, forget all of the other excuses. I was upset because that wasn't us.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't us. And so, like you said, the standard being the standard, it kind of eliminates, in a sense, that floor. Like, we're having a conversation, but for them, there is no floor.
Mm-hmm.
It is what we do. Regardless of who we're facing, this is the way we play. And we expect to win. We expect to get to the playoffs. We expect to get to the national championship game. And we expect to win that game. Now we just have to go out and do it.
Right.
So the conversations we're having, they're sitting there, yeah, we got a first-time quarterback, and
right.
Yeah, we guys come. We don't. Yeah, our two best guys are coming back from injury off the edge. So what?
Let me ask you this question, Shaun.
Yeah.
Would you rather have a talented redshirt freshman starting at quarterback with a very veteran and talented offensive line, or a talented a solid veteran quarterback? I'm not talking about Riley Leonard. A solid veteran quarterback with a somewhat talented but very inexperienced offensive line. Like, this is my whole point. It's like,
no, go ahead, because I was going to
answer
say
the question. I asked the question,
no.
so you can
The
answer
option with the redshirt quarterback with the talented offensive line,
right,
and the skilled players around him and experience. Yeah,
right. That's my whole point. That's the difference between this year and last year. Last year, Riley Leonard had to carry the team because he had 6 true starts in front of him. Your most talented offensive lineman got hurt in week 1 of fall camp. You spent most of the year with Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler in starting lineup. Rocco, I like Rocco. Pat Coogan, honestly, should be a backup at a place like Notre Dame. Emil Wagner's a redshirt sophomore. Anthony Knapp was a true freshman. Now you fast forward to this year's team, and you've got 5 returning starters, basically. Your most inexperienced player is Charles Jagasaw, who's also your most talented player by far. And now your second-year player is not Sam Pendleton, who's making his first career start. Your second-year player starting on the left side of the line is now a guy with 15 career starts under his belt, and Anthony Knapp. And he'll be next to a senior with 16 career snaps, as opposed to Anthony Knapp being a first-year player with no career snaps, playing next to a second-year player making his first career start who had 30 career snaps or so coming in the season. That's the thing, is that's the difference, and that's why quarterback is going to determine the ceiling, not the floor, in my opinion. Now, what is the floor for Notre Dame? The floor for Notre Dame, in my opinion, is a team. I think you nailed it, Shaun. I don't need to add anything to it, much more to it, other than just it's a team that just kind of they just kind of go out talent the teams they're supposed to out talent, and then they kind of go 500 against the teams that they should otherwise that are more comparable to who they are. That's really what it boils down to for me. Is it's a team that battles injuries in certain spots. It's a team that battles maybe not being hungry, or it's a team that just also has to deal with occasionally, Shaun, there's just that time where there's just this one team that's way better than we thought it was going to be. And I didn't have Army as being the best team on Notre Dame's schedule last year on my preseason prediction. Was definitely not there. I did not have Bryson Daly as being the best quarterback that Notre Dame was going to play all year. Was not on my preseason prediction. So you really never really know what the opponents are going to be. But I think the floor, I think you nailed it. It's just kind of, it looks like the Brian Kelly era where it's just about, we're good. It's, solid. It's a good team. We're going to out-talent most people. May not always be as pretty as it should, but we get the job done and we keep this thing rolling. That's what the floor is for me for this team. Let's put a record on the floor, Shaun. Where you and I disagree a little bit is I think the floor is potentially missing the playoff. I think the floor is 10-2. I think the floor is you split the first 2 games, win 1, lose 1, and then suffer another upset later in the year. Something that this team has dealt with every year of the Marcus Freeman tenure. You can't just say, and I'm not saying you, Shaun, I'm speaking general you can't just say, well, I expect the team to go 12-0, and I'm fully confident it's going to happen. I'm not even worried about anything other than that. Well, why? Well, because Marcus Freeman took him to a title game. Sure he did. Yep, did great. But part of that title run was a loss at home to Northern Illinois. Like, Marcus Freeman has not proven that he can get a team to run the table in the regular season. He has also not proven that his team can't get beat by a team they have no business losing to. And, we saw that multiple times in the first 2 seasons, only once last year. So that has got to prove. So the floor for me is you do have a lot of youth in some important areas, quarterback, tight end depth, where if you lose your starting tight end, you're in trouble there. depth-wise. Secondary, it still has some youth, especially if there's injuries. Linebacker is more experienced, but still a relatively youngish group. So there's still a lot of areas where this team is young. And then, of course, the unknown of the defensive coordinator. Not that Chris Ash is the problem, but the unknown aspect of Chris Ash, where this team goes 10-2, the schedule's a little maybe tougher than we thought, and this team doesn't play to its potential. That, to me, record-wise, is the floor. That might actually still be good enough to get to the playoff, because I think a second loss last year still gets them in. I just don't think they're hosting. I think that's the difference. Now, but most years won't be like last year. Most years, a 10-2 team doesn't get you into the playoff. So to me, that's my floor for Notre Dame is you anything worse than 10-2 is because here's what floor means for me. You just kind of play your game. You're not really improving. You're not really playing to your max. There's no giant issues. I mean, any team could lose 13 starters and go 6-6, or just play terrible football and lose a bunch of games they're not supposed to. That's not the floor for me. That like the floor for Notre Dame, and I thought in 2016 was 6-6. 4-8 was worse than the floor. So I don't look at floors like what's the worst possible scenario that you could have. It's more of what's the most likely low point of a season where anything beyond that's an underachievement. That's like a dramatic underachievement. I think 10-2 is underachieving for this football team, but it's not a dramatic underachieving. It's
kind of like Georgia's season last year. It was an underachievement, but they won the SEC.
But they were still a good football team.
Right. And they were a good football team. Like,
right.
There's
that, and then there's Bama.
Yes.
That wasn't the floor. That was below. That was sub-floor.
Mm-hmm.
That was below the floor. The floor for Bama last year was 10-2 in the regular season. They went 9-3. That was below the floor. So you can play worse than your floor, in my opinion. This is what we're saying is like, but those usually have to do with unforeseen things. Is usually how that goes.
Yeah, I would say 10-2. 10-2. I would agree with the record. 10-2. I still think this team makes the playoffs. Even if they don't reach regular season potential, I think eventually, if they make the playoffs, that's when you're going to see the best.
Sure.
Of Notre Dame. That's when you see the best of Notre Dame.
I think there's plenty of scenarios where they don't play to their potential and still make the playoff and still play above their floor.
Yeah.
That's why I think the floor is 10-2. So now let's talk ceiling, Shaun, and let's put numbers on it and to a degree, and we'll talk regular season, then postseason. Yeah. To me, floor is 10-2. Most likely how I think the season's going to go, 10-2 means you're playing in a bowl game, not a playoff game. Best case scenario with the floor is that other teams struggle. There's a Bama type teams who have bad losses, Ole Miss type teams who have bad losses. You still get it 10-2. You're like a 10-11 seed, and you're traveling somewhere. Get knocked out in the first or second round. I mean, you could reach your floor and maybe still win a first round game because you get a team that's just not that good. But you're not going in. You're not going past this quarterfinals at best case scenario. But I think 10-2, playing in a bowl game, finish 11-2. That to me is the floor of this team. You say 10-2, 11-1, at least getting in the playoff is your floor. Let's talk ceiling.
Winning the championship. That's it. That for me, that changes from you can go floor and then win the championship and you reach the ceiling. The ceiling is winning the national championship. That's for me. That's it. I don't care how you get it done. Let's just say ceiling is perfect scenario. All right. I'll bite. One of your linebackers it wins the Buckets. Malachi Fields wins. Jeremiah Love wins the Heisman. It's ceiling. You're asking for ceiling, right? CJ throws for 3,800. 28 touchdowns and 8 interceptions.
I didn't mean we're playing CFB 26 on freshman level. I just meant
you asked for the ceiling.
realistic
I'm giving you
ceiling
nuance.
possibilities. Jeremiah wins the Heisman. Malachi wins the Bolitnikoff. If that happens, Notre Dame is going to be better than 2019 LSU, bro. You know that's going to happen. I mean, come on now.
I mean, hey, shoot for the stars.
I just love the fact that you couldn't even say all that without laughing. That's the best part about that.
So, winning the national championship is really simple for me. I guess throw one loss regular season in there. And more than likely, it would be a loss that we just probably wouldn't expect to be a loss, right? It would be one of those teams, one of those games where it's like, oh man, okay, CJ made a couple of mistakes. Notre Dame, still had a chance to win it, just to get it done, and they go off from there, and the rest is history, and they hoist the trophy. That's the ceiling. And I still won all the awards that I mentioned in that picture. I still won all of those awards. Thank you, Jason Smith.
I don't care if Notre Dame doesn't win a single personal award as long as they win a championship at the end of the year. Here's my ceiling versus my floor, or my ceiling thoughts. Is first of all, I begin with the regular season. If they reach their ceiling as a team, I do think they're undefeated. They can reach their ultimate goal and not be undefeated. That's different than me saying they reached their ceiling, like legitimate ceiling, because I still look at their roster or their schedule. And while I think there's some good football teams in their schedule, I think Miami's a good football team. I have them in my preseason top 25. I have Texas A&M sniffing the top 10 in my preseason top 25. I have Navy in my preseason top 25. I have Boise's a borderline top 25 team. I think NC State's going to be a better team this year than they were last year. At least on offense, they will be. I got some questions about their defense, but even there, they bring back some good football players. I think there's some good teams on their schedule, but I also think none of those teams have their roster. And the team that's closest to them roster-wise, you get at home after a bye, and that's Texas A&M. You get USC at home. I mean, the only team that you're playing on the road that can really sniff your roster is Miami, and that's a big one. But I think you can reach your ultimate goal and not be undefeated. But in my opinion, if you are playing to your ceiling, then you beat the teams you're supposed to beat. And then, of course, once you get to the postseason, this team is capable of beating anybody that they play. So, yes, national championship is the standard. Now, my prediction of the season, if I were to predict 11-1, does not mean this team is underachieving. It just means, to your point, Shaun, there are realities of college football that even great teams have off days. You point to, Alabama in 2011 loses at home to LSU and then whoops LSU in the rematch in the title game, both on a neutral field. You think of the 2016 Clemson team, which was a great football team, but they looked really not great on that one late November Saturday against Pitt. It just happens. You talk about the Bama team in 2012, just had that day where they just couldn't stop Johnny Manziel and Mike Evans. It just was one of those days. You know what I mean? So every team has those days. I mean, you think of Clemson almost losing to Syracuse in 2018 and what that looked like. Every team has those days. That doesn't mean that you don't reach your standard or your goals. It just means maybe you don't necessarily play to your ceiling, because your ceiling is an undefeated regular season. I'm not saying that anything below that is underachieving, because ultimately the standard is you win a championship. And I don't, as we said earlier, I don't care what the regular season looks like as long as the end of the season results in a championship. Just like if they go 12-0 and beat everybody they play by 40 and get knocked out in the quarterfinals, I'm sorry, you didn't play to your standard this year because you got beat in the quarterfinals. Yeah, but we set a new record for this, this, and this. It was a great season, but you fell short of your standard. There's a difference. I'm not one of those championship or it's a failure type of people. It's the expectation standard is here. How close do you get to that is going to determine the success of the season. So I look at it and say that. I think this team's ceiling is a championship. And I have, I believe, 8 teams on my preseason prediction right now that I look at and say their ceiling is a championship. That's more than most years, which is what's going to make winning a championship a challenge. Because I think there was maybe 4 teams that were capable of winning a championship last year. I think Notre Dame, Ohio State, well, not how we thought going in. There's probably 5 or 6, and it wasn't all the 4 that necessarily thought. There weren't minimum 8, and there's minimum 8. But last year, the way the season played out, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon were all capable of winning a championship. I don't think Penn State was capable of winning a championship. If they'd have beat Notre Dame, they wouldn't have lost. They would have lost to Ohio State or Texas, whoever they play. They weren't winning at all. And I've argued Notre Dame didn't even play well against Penn State and still beat them. Same with Georgia wasn't a championship team last year. They just weren't. Arizona State wasn't. Tennessee wasn't. Indiana wasn't. Those were not teams capable of running the table. There were teams capable of pulling upsets, but they weren't teams capable of winning at all. And so that's why I say there was 4 last year. Right now, I have double that going into the preseason. Now, we don't know what it's going to look like once season plays out, but I do think it's a deeper year this year than what it has been. And all the 4 teams that I thought could win it last year are all on my teams capable of winning it all this year. I also add Alabama to that list. I add Clemson to that list. I add Georgia to that list. Did I say Alabama yet? Oregon's on that list. And I'm trying to think who was and I'd add Penn. I think this Penn State team is going to be more capable of winning it all than last year's Penn State team. Not by much, and they're high in my preseason ranking, but they're much lower on my who has the best chance of winning a championship ranking because they're still led by James Franklin. And I think you have to at least consider the possibility of LSU being on that list too. They're not there for me. There's a lot of things that need to go right, but if everything goes right for LSU this year, I think they're capable of making a run. There's a couple teams like that, but they're not on my list of 8 because the 8 teams I talked about don't need everything to go perfectly to win it all. The teams I have are teams that are like, if you just play somewhat within your potential, you have a shot to win it all. That's where I'm at this year. I'd be curious from the chat, who do you guys view as the teams that you view right now capable, if they play to their ceiling, are capable? Not everything's perfect, but just reasonable. And that's kind of where we were joking, Shaun, but like when I think ceiling in all seriousness, ceiling to me is not everything reaches its full potential. It's as a team you reach your full potential. If Notre Dame does that, they will have more individual award winners than they've had in the past. To your point, if they play to their ceiling, you're going to have somebody in the pass game step up and play better. I think I'd say probably Eli Raridan has a better shot of winning the Mackey than a tight end, a receiver does of winning the Biletnikoff, just because of how that award is given. But Jeremiah Love's got a shot to win some awards. Some linemen will have shots to win some awards. DBs, linebackers, D-line. You have a lot of guys capable of winning awards. So that's kind of where I'm at for that one. But I think we agree this team's capable of winning a championship if they play with potential. And I would say if they play to their ceiling, I said this, Shaun, I want to get your take on this. Somebody asked me to give my hot take of the year, the hot take of the summer. And I said, here's my hot take. And I believe a hot take has to have it has to be true. It has to be something it has to be something you genuinely believe. A hot take is not saying something like, I think CJ Carr is going to throw for 7,455 yards this year and 73 touchdowns. That's not a hot take. That's just you being dumb. Like, a hot take is something that's not popular. It's kind of out there, but also, in my opinion, it's not. It's you believe it to be true. My hot take was this: I think if Notre Dame is healthy, and most of their 2D plays to some close range to their potential, I think Notre Dame has more questions than some other top teams, but I think Notre Dame has the best roster. On paper, depth, top-level talent, I think the best roster has to have elite talent at the top. I think they have that. It has to have elite talent on both sides of the ball. It has to have elite talent, skill, and trench play. You have to be deep as well. And I think my hot take was Notre Dame has the best roster in college football. What is and that's why my ceiling is what it is. What is your response to that?
Oh, man. Well, I guess I can see where you're coming from at that point. I really don't think – you think that's a hot take?
I do, because they haven't been that way since 1989.
Yeah. Yeah. And we pointed that out early. You know what? I just think there are more teams. My thing of teams that have a chance. Once you get into a tournament, you have a chance to make a run, and fluky things happen. Like anything can happen. That's why I would have added Penn State. Would I have taken them against Ohio State? No. But if they showed up on that night, we didn't expect Notre Dame to play the way they played that night. But they did. That was out of character. Who's to say Penn State shows up against Ohio State and Ohio State plays out of character for the first half, and then the next thing you know, Penn State ends up winning the game. So I think I look at it from the standpoint of teams that have a chance to actually make a run to get there. So I would have included Penn State.
Yeah.
In
but
that,
I think the fact that Penn State lost Notre Dame the way they lost Notre Dame is evidence of why I don't have them on there. Having said that, when you get to the semis, it's not. I'm not going to debate with you. No, Shaun, you're wrong. That semifinal team that made the top 4 didn't have a shot to win at all.
Yeah.
My only response would be the only reason they were even there is because they had the easiest draw, and we said that before the playoffs started.
Yeah.
That's the easiest draw there is. If Georgia had that draw, they're getting the semifinals.
They're getting the
semifinals,
and I don't think
probably they could have won it all. Yeah. If Arizona State would have had their draw, I think they'd have had a shot.
They'd have had a shot at getting there.
If Clemson had that draw, they'd have had a shot at getting the semifinals. Doesn't mean they could have won it. The only thing that gives you pause is they did play Notre Dame tight.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think Notre Dame played poorly for like 3
quarters. We both
of that
agree.
game
We both agree
and
on
still
that,
beat
right?
Penn State.
So it's almost like they pinned Ohio State did to Notre Dame what they had just done to Penn State in the semifinals. Right? Ohio State played well. I don't think they were happy with the way they played in the second half. You said they took their foot off the gas.
They did. Offensively, they did.
But defensively, they weren't happy with the way they played in the second halh. So that wasn't.
Some of that in the second half was just like, I don't know what you're supposed to tell them DBs to do. Like the touchdown pass to Jaden Greathouse, like the second one.
The second one over.
What do you tell Jordan Hancock there?
That was a perfect pass.
And he caught it with one freaking hand.
Drop,
I don't know what he could have done better than that. The one where he made Caleb Downs miss, it's like, dude, you were a little out of control and he made you look silly. But like some of those plays with Jaden Greathouse, you're just like, I don't really know what to tell that guy.
Yeah.
At that point in time. But there was like they left Mitchell Evans wide open on a play over the middle of the field. He caught and run. I mean, there's some things that they didn't play well that game. That's what was so frustrating about the first half is because those things were open in the first half too, and they were not hitting them. They were missing them. And now would that have been good enough to beat Ohio State? Who knows? No clue. It's just more about the point is it's more about, you would have liked to have found out what would this game have looked like if we played our game. That's what Marcus Freeman's point was.
Yeah.
Maybe Ohio State still wins, but it's a different looking game. Who knows? Yeah. But I think they just would have felt, and I almost kind of wonder if you're going to lose, I almost think it's kind of better to lose this way. Because now you have a little extra motivation. Yeah. Exactly. As opposed to, hey, man, we played as well as we could have. It was, all that kind of thing. That's kind of where I'm.
It's set it up. Would you, since you mentioned that, and you pointed back to 93.
I said 89. I think last time they had the better roster was 89. I think 89. Florida State probably had a better roster than Notre Dame in 89 or 93. I just think Notre Dame was a bad matchup for them.
For them, style of play. Yes. That's a great point. So looking back at 89, would you say 89 was a more talented roster than 2025 Notre Dame?
In a different era, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just I'll see your Jeremiah Love and I'll raise you Rocket Ismail and Ricky Waters and you know what I mean? Like, I mean, you Dorsey Levens couldn't sniff. I mean, if you think this running back room is deep, that room was every bit as deep. Like, it just was. You had Rocket Ismail at receiver. You had Derek Brown at tight end. You had, NFL players in the offensive line. You had great secondary. Had Todd Light. Leonard Moore's a great player. He's Todd Light, but a year younger at that age because Todd was a junior in 1989. You had Pat Terrell,
Christian
who was a
Gray,
high draft
Stan
pick.
Smagala is Christian
Right,
Gray. Yeah.
right. I mean, you had elite players on that 89 team, and you had depth. I mean, you lose Michael Stonebreaker, and Ned Bolkar goes out there all year and balls out. I mean, so you had depth at linebacker as well. So,
yeah.
And then of course with you said 25 team, right? Or did you say 24? You know,
25.
Quarterback Tony was more of a known commodity than what CJ.
At that point, he was in his second year.
Yeah, second year's a starter senior year. You know, and was I think finished second in the Heisman Trophy voting that year, I believe in 1989. I think that was the case. He was definitely top 5, I believe. 1989 Heisman Trophy voting. Let me go pull that up here real quick. Yeah, it was Andre Ware was number 2. No, Tony was 4. Andre Ware was 1. Anthony Thompson was 2. Major Harris was 3, and then Tony Rice was 4.
Anthony Thompson from Indiana.
Yeah, man. So, but he's finished in the top 5, and then Rocket finished 10th that year. So you had 2 guys in the top 10 of Heisman Trophy voting. You beat 7 top 15 teams. You beat the number 1 team in the country at the end of the year. That team was just loaded. He had Chris Zorich on the defensive line. I know George Williams was suspended that year, but yeah, Jeff Alm. I mean, that 1989 team was just ridiculously good. I mean, it was a really loaded team.
Yeah.
So, I'd say that team was probably better. But again, it's hard to really fairly say that, Shaun, because I look at the 89 team based on what we know. I mean, think about the 89 team. Anthony Johnson was a second-round draft pick on that team, and he wasn't even their best running back. You know what I mean? Like, think about that for a second. Like, he wasn't even their best running back. And he finished 3rd on their team in rushing yards. And he was only 37 yards above Rocket in rushing yards. And he was a second-round draft pick. Yeah, Tim Grunhard, Jeff Alm, Pat Terrell, Mike Brennan was a 4th-round draft pick in the offensive line. Stan Smagala was drafted. Ned Bolkar. I mean, that team was absolutely loaded. You had Todd Ladd on that team, Ricky Waters, Chris Zorich, Bob Dahl, Rocket Ismail, Andre Jones, Scott Kolkowski. Michael Stonebreaker was out that year, you know, but you were still – I mean, that team was so loaded. Derek Brown was on that team, Rod Smith. Rodney Culver ended up being a 4th-round draft pick. He was like their 4th running back on that team in 1989. So, like I said, their leading rusher running back was Ricky Waters. Number 2 is Anthony Johnson. Number 3 is Rodney Culver. Their number 4 leading rusher that year at running back was Dorsey Levens, who couldn't get on the field, so he transfers to Georgia Tech, becomes a draft pick, wins the Super Bowl with the Packers. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what – but they had elite talent on both sides of the ball and depth. That's what that team had. But we're looking at that team as a finished product. It's hard for me to compare C.J. Carr at all to Tony Rice because we've never seen C.J. Carr throw a pass.
Yeah.
Or, you know, by the end of the year.
2 totally different offenses.
Right. But I'm just saying, I look at it, it's dominance within your system. It's not about stats. It's dominance with – Tony was dominant in that system. I mean, Tony Rice finished 4th in Heisman Trophy voting. He threw 2 touchdowns and 9 picks. It was dominance within that system. He led them in rushing. It was dominance in the system. I look at D-line. My opinion at the end of the year may be different than it is right now. I know what Chris Zorich was in 1989. I don't know what Jason Onye and Gabriel Rubio and Armel Mukam are going to be this year. I knew what those guys were on the edge in 1989. I don't know what Boubacar Traore and Bryce Young are going to be. So it's hard to say that. Definitely more talented than the 2024 team. But it's hard to say completely because we just don't know what that product's going to be. So that's kind of how I look at that one. So we both agree. The floor is a borderline playoff team, either just missing out or just getting in. Maybe winning a game, but not making a run. That's your floor. Your ceiling is winning a championship. And I think that's
simply put,
reasonable to say.
Man, and my awards. Don't leave out my awards now.
Well, I mean, if you reach the ceiling, there will be plenty of personal awards for the season, but I don't think they're going to win the Biletnikoff and the Heisman and the Doak and
don't say that
and the Johnny Unitas and the Lombardi and the Bednarik and the Jim Thorpe.
I didn't say the Unitas. Outland. I will go Outland.
One thing is for sure, they won't win the Jim Thorpe Award next year because the Jim Thorpe Award is a award that I believe the people that vote on that say, hey, let's do something really dumb every year. And that's why the guy, the best DB in the country, like almost never gets that award. So yeah, we'll say that one. But anyway, Shaun, we're going to talk about the NCAA settlement here in a second. But before we do, folks, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Give us a 5-star review. We would greatly, greatly appreciate that. And, of course, if you're someone who wants to support Irish Breakdown beyond just watching our shows and you want to help us continue to grow our channel, our product, our content, our staff, you can always support us by being a member of the message board. You can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You can be a monthly member, annual member, or you can join one of our booster clubs. But either way, great place to be. Intel, breakdowns, great community, all that kind of good stuff. You will find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com.